new life with a fresh new faith, a whole new start, my past erased. You placed my feet on solid rock. You showed me love that would never stop. You put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise, and now I'm gonna let it out. Hear me shout, I am free, free indeed. Cross the line, alive in me. I can't help but sing hallelujah, my song for all my days. Hallelujah, all to the God who saves. Hallelujah, my song for all my days. Hallelujah, all to the God who saves. Jesus Christ, my Savior, I'd be lost without your grace. You make it easy, easy, so easy to praise. You make it easy, easy, so easy to praise. You make it easy, easy, so easy to praise.
You ready? Well, good evening, everybody. I welcome you to Woodmont on this, I guess, summer Wednesday night. I want to begin with a prayer, and we're going to get going. So welcome. Let's pray. Loving God, thank you for Alberto Gonzales, his willingness to come and talk to us tonight. Thank you for his leadership at Belmont Law School here in Nashville, and also to our nation. We pray for your presence tonight as we talk about a number of different things. Give us insight, give us open minds, help us to learn and grow. All this we pray in Christ's name. Amen. We have a video that I want you to watch, and I'm going to say a few words. So I want to introduce our speaker. Yeah, go ahead and applaud.
I often talk to students who are much younger than you are, and they don't know who I am. And that's why my wife, Becky, who's in the audience, and she prepared the video so that we can kind of show them, hey, I really used to do something. And that's why we created the video.
Well, I think that's great. I think most of the folks here know who you are.
Like a more mature, informed crowd.
They will take that as a compliment, I'm sure. So let me give you just a brief introduction to Dean Gonzales. After attending the United States Air Force Academy, Alberto Gonzales received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Rice University and his JD from Harvard University. He was nominated by President George W. Bush and confirmed by the United States Senate as the 80th Attorney General of the United States in February of 2005, and he served in that capacity until September of 2007. He's worked as a partner at a major Houston law firm, Vinson and Elkins, and held government positions as a justice on the Texas Supreme Court, Texas Secretary of State, General Counsel to the Governor of Texas, and Special Counsel to the President of the United States. Currently, Judge Gonzales is a member of the NCAA Division I Committee on Infractions, the Commission for Uniform Legislation, and the American Law Institute. He also serves on the board of directors for the United Way of Metro Nashville. For his many accomplishments and years of public service, Judge Gonzales has received numerous awards. I can't even begin to list all of them. But 10 years ago, he became the dean of Belmont University's new law school, and he served in that post since 2014. He also holds the Doyle Rogers Distinguished Chair of Law. Dean Gonzales teaches constitutional law, First Amendment law, national security law, and separation of powers at Belmont Law School. So now, again, would you join me in welcoming Alberto Gonzales here to Woodmont tonight?
Yeah, I don't. Two things. I don't teach those classes all at the same time. Let me be clear. And secondly, I've been a little under the weather, and so I have a dry cough, and so I may rely upon these lozenges. And please excuse me.
We're glad you're here, and thank you for coming to talk to us tonight. So I'd love for you just to give everybody who knows of you and your career, and maybe those who don't, just a little bit of background on your life. And what got you interested in law and the justice system from an early age?
Grew up in Houston. I'm a proud Texan. I'm going to be buried in Texas, although we're going to retire here in Nashville, I hope. And I grew up in a family. There were 10 of us in a small 2-bedroom house in a community called Humble, Texas. My dad had a 2nd grade education. My mom had a 6th grade education. We didn't have hot running water the entire time I lived at home. Didn't have a telephone until I was a junior in high school. So we were pretty poor. So when I graduated from high school, I had little encouragement to go to college. And so like many people in that position, I joined the Air Force, or I went into the military. And this was toward the end of the Vietnam War. My first duty assignment was Fort Yukon, Alaska. After turning down an assignment to Key West, Florida, I decided to Fort Yukon, Alaska. And there was 100 GIs there, in a little remote radar site about 60 miles north of the Arctic Circle. 2 of the people that were stationed, 2 officers, were Air Force Academy graduates, and they saw something in me, I guess, and they said, "You're a bright kid, you ought to think about going to college, and you ought to think about going to the Air Force Academy." So they helped me get an appointment, and I left there at the end of, I guess, 1975, and went to the Air Force Academy Prep School, then the Air Force Academy, and was there for a couple years. My hope was to become a pilot at that point in time, and my eyes started to turn bad, and the future as a pilot was really in doubt, so I left, went to Rice University, small private school in Houston. And it wasn't until I was a junior at Rice that I thought about law school. We didn't know any lawyers, of course. Everyone who majored in political science, which I was majoring in, they were going to go to law school. So I said, okay, I'll go to law school. And I was fortunate enough to get an appointment to Harvard. And after Harvard, I went back to Houston, practiced law for 13 years. But I really wasn't that happy as a lawyer working at a big firm. And then I met this guy named George W. Bush, and he's campaigning against Ann Richards, a very popular Democratic governor. And the first time I heard Bush talk, I thought, what a great guy. I really like him. But I said, he has no chance of beating Ann Richards, the incumbent Democrat. And of course he does. And a few weeks after that, one of the partners at my firm called me and said, George Bush would like to talk to you about coming to work for him as his lawyer. And I'm really surprised because I don't really know him. I only met him one time during the campaign. So a few weeks after that, I go to Austin. I'm giving you a long-winded answer. A few weeks after that, I go to Austin to sit down with him, and we kind of interview each other. And at the end of our discussion, I said, Governor, I have to ask you, why me? You don't know me. There are 60,000 lawyers in Texas. Why me? And he tells me this story. He says, you know, back when my dad was first elected president in '88, you went to Washington and interviewed for some positions, and it's true. When Bush 41 was elected president, I went up to Washington, interviewed for junior positions at HUD, I think at Veterans Affairs, and maybe Commerce. But I wanted to stay at my firm and become a partner. There had never been a minority partner at Vincent Elkins, and I wanted to be the first. So fast forward to Austin, Bush says, you turned down my old man for a job. He says, that's how you got on my radar screen. And I was very surprised that he knew that story, remembered that, and it was just the first example of, he has an incredible memory for faces and stories. And what made him such a great politician is the fact that he connected really well with people and had a very good memory. So Bush and I hit it off. He's very extroverted. I'm very introverted, and for some reason we clicked. And, you know, he's the son of a president. I'm the son of a construction worker, and I think he liked my story. So we got along very well, and he's governor of Texas. He appoints me Secretary of State. Then he puts me on the Supreme Court of Texas. And, of course, by that time, there's speculation he's going to run for president. And I was, you know, happy in Texas. But about 2 months before the 2000 election, Clay Johnson, his roommate, was putting together the transition team. And Clay came to me and said, when Bush wins, he's going to be looking for someone to be White House counsel. And we want you to do this. Now, of course, I did the right thing in saying, well, I got to talk to Becky first before deciding whether we'd go to Washington. But I knew immediately, my goodness, to be able to work in the White House, I'm often asked, of the jobs you've held, which was the best, which was the most fun? You know, being a cabinet secretary as AG is wonderful. It's a great privilege. But in terms of pure fun, if you're an American citizen, to work every day in the White House, it just doesn't get any better than that. Just a joy. And it's the reason why I became a lawyer. Every day, every hour, every minute working there is special because the most powerful person in the world is in the White House. And so that was a very, very special time for me and my family.
So George Bush is elected in 2000. He is sworn in January of 2001. Talk to us a little bit about your time as Attorney General. How did that come about? And then what did you love about that? What was the hard part about that?
There's a lot of hard part about being Attorney General, as Merrick Garland is quickly realizing. Because of my position as counsel, I worked closely with John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, during Bush's first term. So I knew all the issues at Justice. I knew most of the senior people at Justice because my job was to make sure that all the legal issues were being properly addressed, working with John Ashcroft. I wasn't the Attorney General. He was the Attorney General. And a lot of the controversial, difficult issues that arose with respect to the war on terror, a lot of those issues, you know, John Ashcroft and I, we worked together to try to find the right solution. Weren't always popular. We weren't always right. You think it's hard for your child to come in and tell you that they got a C or a D in chemistry? Think about walking to the Oval Office and telling the President of the United States, Mr. President, the advice that the lawyers gave you in terms of telling you, you have the authority to do this. The Supreme Court of the United States just said, you can't do it. But he was the kind of client that what he would say is that's what the courts are for. They tell us whether or not we're doing the right thing. If we are, we continue forward. If they say we're wrong and that we don't have the authority, then we discontinue and try something else. So he was always a very, very good client, although he wasn't technically a client of mine. The United States of America was my client, both as White House counsel and as Attorney General of the United States. Being AG is hard. You know, as White House counsel, I had 14 lawyers that worked for me. As Attorney General, I think I had something like 15,000 employees, many of them lawyers. You have a budget of about $40 billion. It's a big organization. And you're driven around in 2 FBI Suburbans with FBI agents carrying machine guns, so you never have to worry about where you're going to park. You fly around the country and around the world on a G5 jet, FBI G5 jet. I visited over 30 countries as AG because we would have people, FBI, DEA, ATF, just stationed around the world at embassies. And part of my job was to go and show up, thank them for their service, encourage them. And so, of course, I'd have to go up to the Hill a lot, do a lot of press conferences. Congress could be extremely difficult on the AG because every decision the Attorney General makes, there are winners and losers, and there are controversies always. And so it's a very, very difficult job. It's a thankless job. It can be very rewarding, but it's also very, very difficult. It got very difficult for me towards the end because a lot of the policies that the Bush administration put in place shortly after 9/11 started being criticized and scrutinized, and in many ways, they looked at me in terms of being the architect for a lot of the stuff that they felt was controversial. So it can be very, very difficult. I'm often asked, would you do it again? Probably not. I wouldn't want to, except for the fact that America needs good people to serve. And so if the President of the United States asks you to serve, it's because he believes the country needs you. And for that reason, I probably would say, okay, I'll serve. I'd be happy to do it again. Now, Becky wouldn't let me do it again. But I think good people need to find a way to serve. In fact, I'll give one more example. I'll go back to a question. And that is, when I first became White House counsel, I got to choose my staff. And the person I identified to be my deputy counsel was a gentleman named Tim Flanagan. Tim was a Mormon. How many? 12 children, 14 children? 14 children, 3 sets of twins. He's a very busy guy, okay? But he had clerked for Warren Burger, the Chief Justice of the United States. He graduated from UVA with high honors, had held senior positions at Justice. I wanted him to be my deputy. And he turned me down. And after I made the offer. But a day later, Tim called me and he said, I've been agonizing over this. He said, if you think the country needs me, I will serve. I will sacrifice. I've talked to Katie about this, his wife. He says, I think I have an obligation to help the country if that's what you think is necessary. So that's the kind of spirit that I always, was very attracted to, people that understand our country is great because of sacrifices of others at all kinds of levels, beginning at the top with those who serve in our military and sacrifice, life and limb. But that kind of attitude is something that's very, very special and one that we really want to encourage in our young people.
Let me ask you another question from when you were White House counsel and then AG. What was it like being in the Bush administration around 9/11? That was my senior year of college when that happened, and what was that like both immediately and as a lot of the policies that you're talking about that did come under scrutiny unfold?
Yeah, looking at the age of this crowd, I would say all of us have a 9/11 story. We all remember about that day and what happened, what we were thinking, what we watched. And I began in Norfolk, Virginia, giving a speech that morning, and I spent the day trying to get back to Washington before Bush did. He started at an elementary school in Florida, and I really wanted to be back at my post before the commander-in-chief got back. So we both get back, and there are 2 moments that stand out in my life in terms of service while I worked in the White House. One of them was standing on the Oval Office porch watching as Marine One brings Bush home on the evening of 9/11, wanting to see his face when he got off that helicopter, because it would tell me a lot about how we were going to proceed as a country. And I'm on the porch with Karen Hughes, the communications director. Both she and I had worked for Bush in Texas, so we know him very well. He gets off the helicopter, comes toward us, and we greet him, and he just nods and walks right by us. Now, he is determined and focused. And we follow him into the Oval Office. There was tarp on the floor because they were readying the Oval Office for an address to the nation that night. They were moving furniture around. And behind the Oval Office is a small study and a small dining room. And he goes into the small study, We were met by Condi Rice, National Security Advisor, Andy Card, the Chief of Staff, Ari Flasher, the Press Secretary. And we began talking about what he was going to say to the nation that night. And all of us also talked about what we'd experienced, what we remembered from what happened that day. And so Bush prepares a speech, he gives a speech, and we show up the next morning, and it's a brand new world. It fundamentally transformed everything that we were doing as an administration for the American people. Bush had high hopes, for example, on immigration policy. As a border governor, he had some strong ideas about border security and what we could do as a nation to ensure our security. All that went out the window because of what happened on 9/11, because he knew his primary focus had to be protecting our country. Sometimes at Mass, were you guys scared? Not once. We all took our cues from the leader, and that's the thing that when I talk about leadership, people watch, if you're the leader, people watch how you handle danger, how you handle difficult times, emergencies. They watch the leader carefully. And so for Bush, he was just always determined. And never once did I ever see him falter, express any kind of fear, concern. He was focused, and he felt that his job was to protect America.
So I want to fast forward a little bit. You served in the administration, you had multiple roles, lots of incredible experiences. What brought you to Nashville and Belmont Law School? How did that unfold?
It unfolded, I can't remember exactly the year, but our middle son, Graham, was looking at colleges, and he wanted to look at 3 colleges, faith-based schools here in Nashville. That was important to him: Belmont, Lipscomb, and Tribeca. Becky normally took Graham on the college visit, but she was sick, and so I brought him here. I had only been in Nashville one time in my life, and as Attorney General, I made a visit here. And so we brought him here. Again, I'd never heard of Belmont. I'd never heard of it at all. And a few weeks after that visit, the founding dean reached out to me to ask would I be interested in teaching at the law school. And I said no. I didn't want to leave Texas, and I didn't know anything about Belmont. But we kept communicating, and the offer got better. And I got an offer to work at Waller Lanson, of counsel. And then Graham decided he wanted to go to school at Belmont. So Becky and I decided, okay, we'll go to Nashville and we'll see what it's like. And since then, 2 of my sons have graduated from Belmont. Becky has graduated from Belmont. We're all in for Belmont, folks.
So you became dean in 2014?
I became dean after about 2 years, and it's been a great experience to be affiliated, associated with Belmont. There's some exciting things going on there. If you haven't been by there, see the new medical school. So a lot happening. We have a relatively new president, Greg Jones. He's been there, I guess, 2 years. He's got some very exciting ideas, a very exciting vision about the future of Belmont, and the law school is doing really well. So it's been we love Nashville. We love Tennesseans, quite frankly. Tennesseans have the same kind of spirit, frontier spirit, openness, like Texans, and there is an affinity, a camaraderie between Texans and Tennessee. And of course, when I first got here, I used to give speeches a lot, brag about being from Texas, and invariably someone would come up at the end and say, there wouldn't be a Texas but for Tennesseans that came to fight with you at the Alamo. And it's true. And in fact, Bush, when he was governor, he had a huge portrait of Sam Houston hanging in his office because he too realized a lot of Texas independence was based upon the help that we received from Tennessee volunteers.
It's really good to hear a Texan recognize that. I just want to put that out there. Well, I haven't gone to college in Texas. I don't know if any of those folks knew that or whatever, admit to that. So that's great to hear you say. So there's a lot that we could cover tonight, and we are going to save time at the end for Q&A. So I do want to welcome Becky. I'm so glad you're here. I have some of Al's books, so if you ask a really good question tonight, you might get a book before you leave. But let me ask this question to kind of begin. Why do you believe in the American justice system? What is it about the American justice system that sets it apart, that makes it unique?
Well, I think that a lot of what makes America is the rule of law. it is what makes the United States different from other countries from my perspective. Now, obviously, the rule of law has to be respected and followed. It's got to be protected and respected. But it is truly what makes America unique. And I think as a lawyer, I think we have a greater obligation. All citizens have an obligation to protect the rule of law, which is that everyone is treated equally, and the same standard applies. The rules are well known to people, and they're expected to follow them. And if they don't follow them, and it can be proven in a court of law, for example, that there are consequences. Now, of course, prosecutors have discretion in charging decisions, and sometimes people question the exercise of that discretion. Why does this person who commits an act that's similar to this person, but there are different outcomes? It's because prosecutors are different, and they have different experiences, different confidences in their abilities, lack of confidence perhaps in a jury, and so sometimes charging decisions are different. So it's not a question that people are receiving necessarily favorable treatment. It's just a question of perhaps, you've got to be able to make the case. That's the absolute objective is if you're going to bring charges, you do so only if you believe the evidence is there, that you can convince a jury that this person has committed a crime. And if you can't get there, you don't charge. It's as simple as that. There's been a lot of criticism about our justice system recently. Obviously, it's not perfect. But from my perspective, having visited, as I said, over 30 countries, it is one of the best in the world. And but it does depend upon the people that are within that system to do their job. And I would hope that all of you, while you may have some questions about some of the decisions made within our justice system, that you generally support it. We desperately need the support of the American people in order to continue to have it, function the way it should.
So one of the criticisms that we hear right now from a number of people is that the American justice system is partisan. The DOJ is partisan. There's one particular case that everybody's paying attention to right now that involves a former president and the Republican front runner. And so there are a lot of people saying that they feel like it is partisan. So how do you respond when people say that?
What I would say is there are, over 15,000 employees at the Department of Justice. Less than 1% are political appointees. Less than 1%. The other people that are there are career employees. They don't care about the president. They don't care about the attorney general or what party they're in. Day in and day out, they have a job to do, and that's what they focus on. So it is hard to make political decisions in the department. You do so at your own peril, because you know that if you make a decision based on politics as the attorney general or the deputy attorney general or a U.S. attorney, that it's going to get out. It will become public, and you do so at your own peril. We maintain strict separation between ongoing cases, the Department of Justice, and the White House. The only communication that could occur with respect to an ongoing case would involve the White House counsel speaking directly either with the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General. And you would never, ever try to put any kind of pressure on the Department of Justice in terms of what the department should do, because you put in jeopardy the future of the presidency in that the American people aren't going to stand for that. And they shouldn't. We should not stand for the politicalization of decisions relating to prosecutions. We shouldn't do that. And so I think to say that it's easy to say that the Department of Justice has become politicized, but show me the proof. Give me the proof. We do not know, when decisions are made at the Department of Justice, we have so little information about the evidence, the proof. The department and the president will always have more information, certainly much more than all of us, certainly much more than the media, as much as they think they know everything. The people that actually are doing the work and have to make the decisions, they will always have more information about what really is going on. So when I'm asked to criticize or second-guess Merrick Garland when he makes a decision, sometimes I may look at that decision and say, that looks curious. I'm not sure that I would have done the same thing. But then I would immediately remind myself, I don't know what Merrick Garland knows. and that if I had that same information, I might make the same decision. So I would just encourage you to take a step back, wait a second, and just remember, we don't know everything about what went into that decision. So, you know, are the investigations that are going on now, are they political? You know, I don't have enough information to say. What I can say is I know many of the people, the career people that are still at the Department of Justice, and I don't think they would allow that to stand, is my own personal opinion.
Can you give any commentary on President Trump's case? I mean, the jury is now deliberating, but
I haven't seen. All I see, you know, from time to time, I hear snippets about what was said in the trials, for example, or what's been found in an investigation. So how can I make an informed decision?
You're not privy to it.
I don't have the information.
Yeah.
So no, you know, I would say, you know, how many of you have ever been subject to 4 ongoing investigations, criminal investigations? How many? So you could say, well, it's clearly political. I don't think so. Maybe it just reflects the possibility this person is not a very lawful person. But maybe he is. Again, he has rights as an American citizen under the justice system. He's got to be proven guilty. But it's still, to me, it says something. You have all these investigations and prosecutions of this individual. I mean, it says something. And I know some people who are supporters would say, well, that's because you have a Department of Justice that is political. You know, as someone who has worked there, it's just hard for me to believe it. It really is. I may be wrong because I don't know what's going on there, but just given what I have experienced and the people that I know that are still there, if I had to choose who's more likely doing the right thing, I would say the Department of Justice. One final thing. When I was going through my difficult times as AG, I remember meeting a very senior U.S. attorney, I think out of Idaho, very experienced U.S. attorney, and he said, I think he was trying to reassure me about what my role should be going forward. He said, you know, the Department of Justice needs protection. You know, it is a castle. The moat around that castle is the Attorney General. The job of the Attorney General is to protect that institution. And so that's, you know, that's the way I tried to do my job, and I think that's the way Merrick Garland's trying to do his job.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but in multiple states, there are some states like Tennessee where the Attorney General is appointed by the governor. That's not correct?
No, I think in Tennessee, the Attorney General is selected by the court. In fact, the Attorney General, this is an odd thing I just realized because I had lunch with General Scarametti just last week. It reminded me that the AG is in the judicial branch, not in the executive branch. And I thought, I guess that's right. And that's why because the Supreme Court makes that decision. They select who the Attorney General is.
So from state to state, is that process different or is it the same?
Oh, very different. In Texas, every major position, you have to stand for a partisan election, even if you're a Supreme Court justice, which is rather strange and difficult to campaign and try to raise money when you're supposed to be impartial as a justice. But yes, there in Texas, everyone has to stand for in a partisan election. So Tennessee is extremely unique, and in many ways you could say that takes a lot of the politics out of the decision about the Attorney General's office here in Tennessee. And from what I can tell of the AGs that I've known since I've come here, Herb Slater was an unbelievable, I think, public servant, a man of great integrity, and so that was a great selection. I think that Jonathan Scarametti also likewise. I think he's a good choice. So much can be said because oftentimes, I mean, the governor the court's going to know a lot more about the candidates to be AG than the voters. Voters oftentimes, they will look to see, okay, is this a Republican or Democrat? And vote for the person that within their party, even though they may not know anything about that person. So I think the Tennessee system has a lot to say for it.
But that's not necessarily the case in every state. And you kind
No,
of
not at
outlined.
all.
So my question then is, in the states where they have to run for re-election, where where politics are clearly involved, and how can the AG in those particular states be impartial? I mean, it seems like it's set up to where there's.
That's a good question. That is a very good question. And people say that in Texas, for example, that the AG is always running to be the next governor, because it's a wonderful platform. You get your name in the press all the time because of high-profile cases. And Greg Abbott, the current governor, was a former AG. John Cornyn was an AG before that. Of course, he's now in Washington as a U.S. Senator from Texas. So it is a platform, quite frankly. And, that's good, but some people would say that's, shouldn't be politicized like that.
I want to share this is a John Meacham quote from 2016. I
love John Meacham.
And I'm going to preface this by, this is going to set up my question. John Meacham, in commenting on the Republican Party, okay. And I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but he said something like, "It's like the Republican Party has been hijacked, and the people or the passengers are cheering on the hijacker." That's what was said back then. What we've seen in American politics is incredible polarization. And there are many people, Republicans and Democrats, who would put themselves on the center right or center left, who feel politically homeless in the system today. You've been a Republican your entire career. You served under a Republican president. Do you have any thoughts about why and how this polarization is being exacerbated, and if there will ever be a change that might bring it back to the center? That's what I wanted to ask you, the polarization question in American politics.
Yeah, I think that, obviously there are a lot of people asking that question. What's wrong with us? And the expectation that that if we just pick the right leader, our country's going to be okay. I think leadership is important, but the truth of the matter is, all of us, we can fix it. We can fix it by demanding certain kinds of behavior, demanding certain kind of civility, demanding that people in Congress actually do their job instead of these silly arguments that we see on the evening news. And so I worry about where the Republican Party is, quite frankly. I could not win a statewide race in Texas today. I'm not sure Bush could win a statewide race in Texas today, honestly. Bill Haslam really considered running for president.
Yep.
I really wanted him to run because I thought he would be a good president. But he told me that in the end, he says, there's no lane for someone like me in the Republican Party. No way I could win.
He told me the same thing.
And he's right.
Yeah, Bill Haslam is a moderate. He's a Republican, but he didn't feel like. I think the quote that I got was, "The Republican Party left me," and I think there's a lot of people that that would feel that way in both parties. That as the polarization has gotten worse, moderates feel like they don't have a voice, and it continues to grow. Something, this is going to shape up to be a presidential election unlike any we've ever seen. Something that's interesting is that as President Trump faces legal challenges on multiple fronts, it seems to strengthen his support. And he seems to be using it to get more support. And that's a fascinating thing to watch. But do you have a take on that?
I don't understand it. And I don't want to offend anyone in the audience, but the notion that people believe January 6th didn't really happen, that it was a Capitol tour that went wrong, that that there wasn't an assault on the Capitol, and people that believe that the election was stolen, even though there have been multiple case after case where people had the opportunity to present evidence to show that the election was in fact stolen. Now, no election is perfect. As Secretary of State, I was responsible for elections in Texas, so I know that sometimes there is some cheating that goes on, and sometimes machines malfunction. So no election is perfect, but in case after case, and Bill Barr, the Attorney General at the time, said, Not enough here to show that the election was stolen in any way. Chris Krebs, head of cybersecurity for the U.S. government, said, nope, there was nothing to worry about. So, but people nonetheless continue to believe the election was stolen. Now, when we can't even reach agreement on the truth, it makes it very difficult to try to reach an agreement on the way forward with our country and who should lead this country. I don't know why people want to continue to believe that the January 6th, what happened on the Capitol Hill. I mean, when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. This was our capital under assault. And I thought, what are our other countries around the world going to think when they see this? And of course, the election, it's just, I worry about it, but really, we need good leadership, no question, but we have a responsibility too. We have a responsibility to expect mature leadership, and we have a responsibility for people to recognize the truth is truth. You can't just make up stuff and say it's not real.
But that's one of the challenges that we find ourselves in a postmodern culture, right? Is that we can't agree on truth, which is what makes it so hard.
Social media, I think, has played a part of this, which is different from the past. But again, I think it's going to start with us. I really do. And I think you're going to find more, as we get closer to the election, you're going to find more people stepping up. I don't want to say moderate Republicans. What I'm going to say is I think Americans who care about our country, responsible Americans are going to, I think, hopefully step up and say more about reality.
But how did we get to a place, and it's something that we do a lot, we do these forums here because I think they're important, and we talk about hard issues because I think they're important, but we find ourselves in a place where oftentimes people can't have the dialogue. It's so charged and the emotions are so high that we can't even talk about what we think is true, what we think is not true. If somebody, it used to be that, you could say, I disagree with you, but I still respect you as a person. That's not the case anymore, which is disheartening. But how did we get to this point?
I'm not smart enough to have an answer to that. What I can say is, let's rely upon, we all believe in God. We're all Christians. It's important. Our faith is important to us. We must remember that the person that we're arguing with was created in the image of God. And we needed to go the extra mile to try to understand. Greg Jones often talks about when you find yourself in a disagreement, put yourself in the place of wonder, which is to say, wonder why that person believes the way that person does. Try hard as you can to understand why that person believes the way they do. And then ask the question, I wonder why I believe the way I do. And really search yourself to find out why I believe the way that I do. Meaning that it may be as simple as trying extra hard to understand better the positions of others. Now, of course, it's a two-way street, hopefully, in order to make progress. But the other thing, in addition to being open to dialogue, is civility, and treatment of each other. Unfortunately, what we see in Congress, for example, to me it's appalling. It's childish and just sends a terrible example. But again, I don't think you're going to find the change there, the leadership there. It's going to depend on us. It really is.
So I want to save, I know there's some questions here tonight. I want to save some time for that. But you are a person of faith. You accepted a position at a Christian university, a thriving Christian university. I'm involved with Belmont. And so your faith has played a huge role in your life. It played a role when you served in the Bush administration. It continues to play a role in your life now as a dean of a law school. Can you say more about your own faith and why it matters?
And Becky can attest to this. I'm not as open. I don't talk much about my faith. And I think part of that's because I grew up Catholic, and we just don't do that. But there is no doubt in my mind, when we talk about the characteristics, necessary characteristics or qualities of a successful president, I do not believe you can be president and do a good job as president if you don't believe in God and the power of prayer. Because the decisions are so difficult. And one after another, you cannot be a good president if you're not a decision maker, because that's all the job is about, making decisions. And you've got to be courageous, because they're extremely hard decisions. And you've got to be able to say, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for. That's very, very important. You have to have a positive vision for America. I think Americans respond to a positive message. Sure, we have problems, but we want to be reminded about what a great country this is. And we want the president to say, come with me. I can take you to a better place. I've been to the other side of the mountain. I know what is possible in this great country. You come with me and I'll take you there. I think Americans will respond to that. I think integrity is extremely important, quite frankly. I think also that you just have to treat people with respect and show leadership. So I wish we had more time, because I've got some great stories about how Bush treated people with respect and civility, and that's what we need, that kind of personality in the White House.
Tammy, I'm going to get you to go ahead and grab the microphone. If you have a question, put your hand up. But my last question is, all the students that are coming through Belmont Law School, what if you said, this is what we want your time at this school to prepare you for your life, your career? What's most important to you as dean for those young people that are coming through?
They got to pass the bar.
Right. And by the way, Belmont has one of the highest bar passing rates in Tennessee. So
we want them to be lawyers. I mean, but part of being a lawyer, there's an ethical standards for lawyers, professionalism requirements, and so that's a big part of being a lawyer, whether you're a person of faith or not. Treating people with respect and civility. We're professionals, so the person arguing against you on the other side, he's a professional. He or she is a professional, and you should treat them with dignity and respect. We want them to understand that lawyers represent the next generation of leaders for our country. I truly believe that. When people get in trouble today, despite all the lawyer jokes, who do they call? They're going to call a lawyer. Okay? You look at Congress. Most of the people in Congress are lawyers. Now, some people may say, well, that's the problem. There are too many lawyers. But we teach students, all law schools teach students how to advocate. That's what your job is. You're going to advocate for your client. And we want our students to be able to communicate well, both verbally and in writing or on the computer. Those are the things that we emphasize. And then lastly, try to enjoy yourself. I've met a lot of unhappy lawyers. I tell them that find something in your life that makes you happy. Because before you know it, you're as old as I am, and you look back in your life and you wonder, what was it all for? So find something that you're good at, and find something that makes you happy, that gives you passion. That is what I try to emphasize to our students. That's what it's all about. It's a great privilege from my perspective to be a lawyer. If I had 10 lives to live, I would live 9 of them with a law degree. Now, the one that not as a lawyer would be a professional baseball player. And but with a law degree, you can do so many things. Like, I've been a judge, I've been a dean, I've advised a president, I've advised a governor, I've headed a state agency, I've headed a federal agency, I've worked in private practice, I'm in academia. So you can do so many things. And I try to encourage people to think about the wide options that you have as a law degree.
And somebody wanted me to ask you, if and when Nashville's going to get a Major League Baseball team, is that going to happen? And if so, when? I know you've been involved in this conversation.
I'm going to announce it at a much larger crowd.
Okay.
It's going to be a while, but there's in my mind, there's no doubt Major League Baseball is coming to Nashville.
All right, please put your hand up. Remember, we need questions, and we'll get as many as we can. Cyril.
Dean Gonzales, I recently read the book Packing the Court, about the way that the Supreme Court justices have been selected over the history of the country. And it seems like in a lot of ways it's just a roll of the dice about who dies during which presidents and how many of that presidential, viewpoint get selected,
Right.
and then they have implications that go way down the line for decades. Is there a better way to select Supreme Court justices, or do you have thoughts about that?
I have found that most people that complain about the selection process, the appointment process, are people that are unhappy with the decisions by the court. People that are happy with the decisions by the court think the court's just doing fine. During the transition, Bush asked me, he told me, listen, I want to be ready for an appointment to the Supreme Court, so I want you to find out who are the top candidates. And we started assembling during the transition binders on individuals that Bush should consider if a vacancy occurred. Now, no vacancy occurred during Bush's first term. Kind of gets to your question, because if he had left after one term, he would not have put anybody on the court. He got 2 during the second term, and you're right. I can make arguments why perhaps there ought to be an age limit. Some people have suggested, well, maybe judges should be subject to some kind of psychological examination, make sure they're mentally sharp as they've gotten older. Some people have suggested we ought to have geographic parity. Shouldn't be all graduates of Ivy League law schools, things of that nature. I think the country, by and large, has done reasonably well. The one thing that I think complicates things is that it is so hard to amend our Constitution. So that once the court makes a decision on the Constitution, what it means, it's hard you can't do anything about it, quite frankly. And so people can be upset about a decision by the court. And if it were easier to amend the Constitution, then perhaps people wouldn't view the role of the court quite like they do today. It would certainly, I think, it'd make a difference perhaps in the way the court does its job. And I know there are efforts ongoing. In fact, I'm part of a group that's looking at how we amend Article 5 of the Constitution, dealing with amendments to the Constitution. It is hard. I mean, probably of all the countries in the Western world that have constitutions, ours is probably the hardest to get around a decision by the Supreme Court on a constitutional issue. They have the final word on that because we're incapable of changing our Constitution the way it's structured. So we need to change that structure.
Would you say more about that for those of us why are we incapable? Why is that so difficult?
Because it requires cooperation by a certain number of states through a convention or approval by a supermajority of members of Congress. You're just not going to get it, depending on the issue. It's just not going to happen in today's world, for sure.
All right. Next question. Put your hand up, please. Steve.
Having been a former counsel to the president and also the AG, there's a case before the Supreme Court about presidential immunity for criminal acts.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that? The decision that's coming, what do you think should be?
Well, listen, the notion that, look, I'm going to put President Bush as the president. If he went out and shot somebody, would I say that he should have immunity for that? Boy, I'd have a hard time saying that, quite frankly. Actions made by the president in connection with his presidential duties, that he should have immunity for, because you don't want the president to not send troops into Afghanistan because he's afraid that someone's going to haul him off. The next administration may haul him off into court, for example, for committing war crimes or something like that. There he's exercising his best judgment to protect the country. And so there he should enjoy immunity. That's a clear exercise of presidential power. But there are certain acts which, from my perspective, don't constitute presidential power, an exercise of presidential power. And for that, I have a hard time reaching the conclusion that immunity should exist in every case. I don't think that's the right. I don't think that's the right answer. Whether the court will agree with me, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that's certainly the question that's been posed.
Then how do you differentiate when it should be applied and when it shouldn't, if that's the case?
The court would have to decide, yes, this is an exercise of presidential power. Now, it can get tricky. For example, let's say we're talking about a pardon. The president receives a bribe to pardon someone. The pardon power is virtually unlimited in the Constitution. That is a clear presidential power. So in that situation, can the president be prosecuted for bribery? That's a very, very difficult question. My judgment would be that the Department of Justice would take the position, it's an exercise of presidential power, and therefore the right remedy is for the president to be impeached, and once impeached, then he can be prosecuted. But I think in the scenario that I've just described for you, the department would think very, very hard about prosecuting a president for exercising pure presidential power.
All right, let's go back. Next question. Was there another one?
There's one over here.
Put your hand up. Tammy will come to you. All right, there we go.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier, and I appreciate your comments, that what makes America great is the rule of law and our sticking to the rule of law. Do you think that this country is more secure in the rule of law today than it was when you were Attorney General? Has it gotten better or has it gotten worse?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the institutions that protect that rule of law are under greater assault today than they were, I think, when Bush was president. But that's my own personal opinion. I think that one of the things I do admire about President Biden is that I think he believes in institutions which exist as guardrails against excess power by one of the branches of government. And I think that those institutions should be protected, should be respected. But it's certainly clearly harder today, quite frankly, than it was when I think President Bush was president.
All right, Francis.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much. I'm a lawyer too, and I have a little bit of a bias about this, but we just had a judicial election in Nashville a couple of months ago where we had, I think, several 100,000 eligible voters, and we had about 25,000 people who actually came out and voted in that election. And it's always seemed to me that it doesn't make any sense to have judges, trial court judges or appellate court judges, elected by the voters, because I don't see how the average voter could have any basis for knowing, who's qualified and who's not, and it just seems to be not a good way to do it. What do you think?
When I was Governor Bush's counsel, I went to him and made the same argument. And you know what his response was? He said, as governor of Texas, I cannot go to the people of Texas and take away from them their right to choose someone in their government. That was his response. But I agree totally with you. I think most people have no idea about the qualifications of judicial candidates. They're down at the ballot, down ballot races, and they don't really care to get educated about all of the races. And so oftentimes the party in power, or if you're of that party, you're going to be elected, whatever your qualifications are. I agree with you. I don't support judges being elected, particularly partisan elections, but just elected generally, because oftentimes you're out there raising money, and who are you going to raise money from? Corporations. Businesses don't have cases before the judge, and it's just unseemly. And I hated it when I was on I've only run one political race in my life. It was a statewide race to remain on the Supreme Court of Texas, and I hated going out and asking people for money. Just didn't seem right to me. But in order to get reelected, I needed to do that.
Right there, Chris.
Al, thank you for being here. You've got a unique perspective being AG in Texas, AG in the U.S. on immigration, and that's going to be one of the big topics, obviously, in the coming election. Can you give us some perspective on the issue and what needs to happen?
Yeah, first of all, immigration is a congressional responsibility. It's not a presidential responsibility. It is in Article 1 of our Constitution, meaning it's Congress' responsibility to pass legislation to deal with it. Now, of course, the president has a responsibility to take the tools given to him by Congress and do his job in securing our border. In a post-9/11 world, we have to know who is in this country and why. So I believe in lawful immigration. We need immigrants in this country, but they have to be here lawfully. And we have failed miserably. And because of that, because of Congress's failure to pass meaningful, comprehensive immigration reform, and because, and I may be repeating what Republicans want to say, because of the inaction, the inability of the current administration to enforce the laws as they currently exist, we have a serious problem in our country. But I will say this, as a Hispanic, and as a father, what wouldn't I do to give my children a better life? I would do a lot. I suspect many of you would as well. So we need to find a way. They want to come here because why? We are such a great country, the land of opportunity. But we just got to figure this out. We need to put more pressure on Congress to pass legislation. And a big part of that is border security. There's no question about it. In a post-9/11 world, we have to know who's in this country and why. And yes, we're in a very dangerous situation from my perspective. But it's not solely the fault of the administration. Congress has a responsibility for that as well.
So why could Congress not make any more headway on that issue? Why is it in such a gridlock to address it?
I think there was certainly from what's been reported is that Congress had reached sort of a compromise, a deal on immigration reform, and the former president didn't want it to pass because he felt that it would help President Biden in his reelection. I don't know if that's true, quite frankly, but I do know that they came very close to passing serious legislation that was very tough on immigration, and it couldn't get through Congress. And a lot of reporting is it was because it was political. But, again, we have the power. We put people in these offices. If we're not happy with what's going on in Washington, then let's do something about it.
We got time for maybe one or two more if there are questions. I see Todd up front here, and then we'll begin to wind down for tonight. Todd Patch.
Well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and thank you for your service. I just want to ask a quick question. Clay mentioned before about, we all knew where we were during 9/11, right? I still remember that. And, there was just such a feeling when that happened of unity in our country, right? And it's just, you were proud to be an American, right? And some of the younger people, didn't experience that, but also didn't experience the feeling of unity. And you mentioned a lot of that starts with us. How do we get back to that feeling of unity?
Well, some people say that it will take another kind, like emergency, like Pearl Harbor, like 9/11. I hope it doesn't take that, quite honestly. It's I've said it so many times this evening. We have a responsibility for part of this mess we're in. We may not want to say that. We may not want to believe that, but we do. And our leadership has responsibility as well. So it's just not a problem that's going to be solved by simply standing on the rooftop and hollering, criticizing. Being a democracy is really hard. What's that movie, The American President, where the president gives a speech about democracy? You gotta want it. You gotta love it. It is hard. It really is, because all of us are so different. We all have different needs. We all have different ambitions, and sometimes they collide against each other. So how do we solve that? How do we resolve that? I think people of faith are best situated to do it, quite frankly. Because we believe in the dignity of every human life. And so when someone is telling me something, rather than trashing them, maybe you listen to them more. I guess it was the governor of Utah, we have to learn how to disagree better. I always have liked that. How do we disagree better? We're doing a lousy job disagreeing these days. We hate each other. And that's
I think, Bill Haslam and Phil Bredesen have been leaders in this.
Absolutely.
And I
love that.
The other guy might be right. And they have the podcast say that we don't see eye to eye on everything, but we're going to talk about it and we're going to respectfully disagree.
That's right.
We need more models of that.
And no, there's no question about it. And I'm happy to see that. And so all of us can we can assume that role, quite frankly.
All right, let's go. One more over here, and then I'm going to wind us down.
I think I just have maybe a comment. I was in the media for almost 40 years. And in fact, I was in the media during your administration, but I was on the way out. But I think I have a comment and a question is that I was proud to be called a journalist. And I truly believe, I know my industry very, very well. And I am quite disappointed or even maybe disgusted with what's going on in our media today. Because we were called journalists, and many of the anchors that I grew up with and even were part of during my time, they could be on one side or the other, and you never knew it. Because they would present the facts and they let you decide. That's how I worked. And many of my colleagues. And nowadays, I'm going to just say this, I consider them activists. I think journalism, a lot of it has gone out the window, and I think that is what's causing a lot of the strife in our country, is because they will tell you what they think. Not what's really there.
Well, it's really not news.
And what do you think
it's
about
not really
that?
reporting the news. It's about presenting a viewpoint or an opinion.
Right, but you have to be, but as a journalist, you're not supposed to give your opinion.
Well, I would phrase it differently. So a lot of people today, they want to find out what's happening in the world. They want to find out what's happening in their community, but they don't want to find out what's happening and how they're supposed to feel about it. And it seems like all we have are places to go where you find out, here's what happened and here's what you need to think about it. And many people say, I just want to find out what happened. And then I'll form my own opinion about what I think about it. And that's what seems to be lacking. But the word polititainment, the cable news filling up 24 hours a day, yeah, it's become part of the problem, and now people go to whatever media outlet feeds them in their position, and they stick with it, and it's.
Or they don't move and get out of their bubble to
right.
see what else is going on. Because I've always believed there are two sides.
That's right, for sure.
Well, and today anybody can be the media, right? You can get on social media.
Yeah. Anybody can be an expert, right?
That's right.
All right, we're going to wind down, but I certainly respect what you said earlier about you not knowing the case that's in the news right now, so you cannot make a formulation. I do have a legal question for you, and I'm trying not to put you on the spot. This is a question.
Time.
Yeah. So if former President Trump is found guilty in New York, what does that mean for his presidential campaign? If he's found guilty in the trial that the jury is deliberating on now.
Well, I mean, would you vote for a convicted felon for president?
You're asking me? I'm supposed to be asking the questions right now, Albert. Can he still run? A lot of people want to know if he can still run.
Well, one thing I do know is he can't pardon himself.
Okay.
Because these are state charges. If it were a federal court, there is an argument that you can self-pardon because there's no prohibition in the Constitution. It doesn't seem like it would be right, but one could make the argument that the president could pardon himself. In terms of state, would he go? I'm assuming he would appeal. Of course he would appeal. And the question is, would he be incarcerated during the appeals process? And I don't know how New York law works. So I don't know. Would it affect people's support of him? You have to ask his supporters. I'm not sure there's anything that will change their minds about him, quite frankly, although it'd be a strange place. I don't know what our neighbors around the world, our allies around the world would think of people supporting a convicted felon for president of the United States.
And then my last question is, there's a lot of talk about the concept of Christian nationalism. And so we have a separation of church and state, which I've always said does not mean the separation of faith and politics. I think that our faith informs our values, and our values inform the people that we support. But do you have any thoughts on this concept of Christian nationalism that has been on the rise, and why it's taken hold, what's the downside of it, what's the okay side of it, but this has been something that's been reported on widely, is this topic of Christian nationalism in our country.
Well, I mean, I think what you're really talking about there are Trump supporters, right?
Maybe to a degree, but maybe to a degree, but not all. I mean, I'm not sure I would say all Trump supporters are Christian nationalists.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that.
But,
absolutely not. I don't know that I have an informed or educated answer to that question about Christian nationalism. I've expressed earlier my views about the importance of faith in making tough decisions. But beyond that, I don't have an opinion to offer.
And then my last question, I'm going to let you go. What does it say about our country and our political landscape that we are looking at an election between an 81-year-old incumbent and a soon-to-be 78-year-old former president, that we're going back to the same two, and that there aren't that fresh voices, newer voices, don't seem to have the chance to get in the mix. A few of them tried, but they did not prevail.
Yeah, to me, it says we may need a new system, quite frankly. The two major parties, I think, maybe have too much control about the selections that are presented to the American people, quite frankly. I don't have an answer for how we fix that. I do know there's so much uncertainty and anger, really anger, at the fact that we're gonna have this choice between these two individuals in a country of so much talent, and we're back here. So it's a system that, again, there's a lot of control by the political parties. People are invested because they want to get their person, their party in control. And maybe this is a one-time thing, I don't know. But I disagree with you. I mean, I agree with you that it is a problem.
Do you think that there could be a path for a third party in the near future, or do you think that is just so difficult that it won't happen?
I think the structures are such, and the way that money is flowing to the two major parties is that it will be extremely, extremely difficult. I think they'll have more of a say in the outcome of a major election, but it's hard to see a situation where a third-party candidate would be elected president of the United States. Now, of course, it would depend upon the other two candidates, and it would depend upon the third-party candidate, quite frankly. But you're right, it's sad that we're going to be left with these two individuals. And, that they each have their qualities, good qualities. They each have their downside, quite honestly, but we can do better, I think. Don't you think? We can do better?
Judge Gonzales, thank you so much for being here. Becky, would y'all give him a round of applause?
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have Daniel Diermeyer from Vanderbilt University here to talk about higher ed, ideology, free speech. So that's 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you all for coming, and have a great night.